So pretty much 3 months ago exactly, I ran my very first ever ultramarathon. It was 53 kilometers in the Lake District, 3,000 meters of elevation gain, and here are 17 things that I wish I knew before running my very first ever ultra. By the way, the recovery has been up and down. That's why this video is being made 3 months later, and this is one of my first runs in like a month outside. I've done a few on the treadmill, but the recovery has been up and down. So I'm gonna go for a run today, about 10 to 15 kilometers, nothing over the top. And just whilst I'm running, I'm gonna get the GoPro, take it with me, and give you the 17 best bits of advice that I could give based on my experiences of running my very first ever ultra. Okay, so first bit of advice is to not set any time or goal expectations unless you've obviously done very similar distances before, maybe if you've done a marathon, but even then, ultras are just so different. I went into it kind of with a time in mind that I wanted to finish, but they're just so unpredictable and you just put an unnecessary pressure on yourself. So if you just go into it with the mindset of it's an ultra, it's my very first ever ultra, just focus on finishing, you'll eliminate a lot of unnecessary pressure and nerves. So just kind of go into it with the expectation of this is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, let's focus on finishing. Okay, so number 2 and 3 are very closely linked. Number 2 is practice, practice and practice with your fueling in a variety of different situations. So I only practice my fueling on my long runs, but I was doing my long runs at like an easy pace on relatively easy trails, and then I was doing like my hill and speed work in different runs without fueling. So that's kind of where I made the mistake, because come race day there's going to be times where you have just hit one of the hardest climbs, or you know, you've started a bit too quick and you've got to fuel, but you're not used to that. You're just used to fueling whilst running at a very easy pace, and that's where I went wrong, because then when I'm trying to fuel halfway up a climb or at the top of a climb, it's a lot harder to do when you've just put in quite a big effort and your heart rate's elevated, maybe you're trying to catch your breath. So that's what I mean, just kind of practice in a variety of different runs, different situations. And then tip number 3 is carry salt tablets. They could potentially save your race. They didn't save mine, but I did use them, and I used them all through my training. But I did pass on 2 salt tablets to someone who was severely cramping, and he come up to me at the end of the race and said I wouldn't have been able to finish if you didn't give me them. So salt tablets are a game changer, and you must carry them during your ultra. Okay, tip number 4 is something when I started training and I made my first video about like my plans, I said I was going to do, and I didn't, and that's double long runs. I regret not doing them, but basically it's where you do one long run on a Saturday, for example, and then the next day you do another long run. It just gets your body used to working in a fatigued state, which I kind of did do because I was doing a session the day before my only long run of the week. But I do think it's a different type of fatigue when you're running like easy miles but for a long amount of time. So double long runs will definitely help you in your ultra marathon, and next time I do one, it's something I will definitely be doing. Complete side note, there's a million different ways to tell whether you've lost fitness. I can tell because I am struggling to talk to camera and run at the same time, which is not normally a problem for me. I've just had little niggles, illness, holidays since the 50, and I've just not been able to train properly for like nearly 3 months now, but hopefully I've turned the corner with that. Right, tip number 5 is something you can be guilty of no matter what distance, and I always have been, but it's do not set off too fast. You're doing a minimum of like 50k. What good is having a first fast kilometre? And as I said, this can go for 1500 metres, 5k, 10k. But for an ultra, I done it. I went off a bit too fast. Only for 1 kilometre, not for like numerous, but what good's that gonna do? You want your fastest kilometre to ideally be your last one. I don't know that's tough, but don't make it your first. And once again, tip number 6 kind of ties in, because you should really, if you can, recce the course. Go and have a look at it, or as much of it as you can before racing. And if not, at least know like every twist, every turn, every up, every down, just from like a course profile, like an elevation profile. That way you'll know when your fastest and slowest kilometers should come. I had like a vague idea of the Langdales in the Lake District because I like going up there, and I do run in the lakes quite often, but I didn't know exactly how the course would play out. So that's something I would do differently. I would try and recce it if I could, and if not, I would study the course in more detail next time. Right, tip number 7 is probably something you either know about or have at least heard people talking about, but it's time on feet. Now, it literally is exactly how it sounds. It's not necessarily running, it can be, but it just means being out for a while on your feet, whether that be hiking in the mountains or long runs or double run days or a run in the morning and a hike in the afternoon. Just get as much time on feet as possible, because if you're running an ultra, the likelihood is you're probably going to be walking some of the uphills, walking some of the course, walking the aid stations, but you're always on your feet. So time on feet is another huge factor that comes to ultra. Tip number 8 is you will likely have a fueling strategy. Don't throw it out the window when it gets tough, or when you're hitting a really tough, steep climb. You have a fueling strategy. Even if you've just got to delay it slightly, stick to it. Between about 30 and 40k in my race, I just abandoned fueling, and I regretted it when I got to about 49k, and there was one more little climb. It was about 200-300 meters, but I just felt like I had no energy, and ultimately it could be because I'd ran 49 kilometers, but it also probably wasn't helped by the fact that I just completely abandoned my fueling strategy when it got a little bit difficult. I mean, it's really windy, so you might not be able to hear me, but it feels good to be running outside again. Okay, this next tip is something that you'll do pre-race that will help you post-race, and it's take like a pair of slides or flip-flops or sandals or Crocs or whatever and give them to whoever is going to be there for you. And if you don't have any support team there, do like a drop bag and leave it at the end, because the second you finish that ultramarathon, you are going to want to take your shoes off. I didn't think that was a thing because I've never really raced any further than 26 kilometers, and yeah, your feet get warm and they get sore, but it's fine. Wow, I wanted to get my shoes off at the end of the ultra, and I didn't have any with me. I had some in the hotel and it was only like 10 minutes away, but that was like my immediate thing of like, I need to get my shoes off. So just take some flip-flops, sandals, slides, whatever, and the second you cross that finish line, you'll be very grateful you did. Right, so I kind of forgot what number I'm up to. I think it's 10. And tip number 10 is do not stress about sleep the night before the race. Ultimately, if you can get a good sleep, perfect. But the likelihood is you're going to be nervous. You might not be in your own bed. You may have travelled to wherever you're doing your ultra. Don't stress about it. If possible, get a good sleep the night before that. So if you're racing Saturday, don't worry about the sleep Friday night. As I said, if you can, it's ideal. But the most important one is Thursday into Friday. I don't know how it works, but for me anyway, it just kind of does work that way. If I have a good night's sleep on Thursday, regardless of what happens to Friday night, I tend to be okay. So don't worry about it. Everyone's going to be in the same boat. If you don't get a good sleep, your body will just kind of power through anyway. Okay, number 11. Strength training is important. It's not to be skipped. And if anything, you should really prioritise it and put a bit more time and effort into the type of strength training. I didn't skip mine. I've always done strength training. It's not the best routine, but that's where I went wrong. I didn't change it from what I was already doing. I needed to do a lot more strength work on my quads. Them downhills killed me in my race. That's where I struggled. That's where I lost time. So find a good strength training plan that suits you, and really focus on specific training for runners, particularly if you can find some good training plans or advice that are geared towards ultramarathons. Obviously, you need strength for the climbs, but you need strong quads for the downhills, because if your quads go, you're in for a tough race. Right, the next two pieces of advice are kind of linked. The first one is, if possible, in your training plan, try and do race practice and get that distance as close to the ultra that you're training for. So, as I said, mine was 53k, but the furthest I raced was 26. So, ideally, I would have done a 30 to 40k race, just so you have that experience, that confidence that it brings, knowing that right, I've raced this amount. Whereas going into the ultra, I was confident because of my training, but I did have a bit of doubt of, I've only ever raced half this distance, so I don't quite know how that's going to go. So if you can fit that into your training, get some race practice as close to the race distance as possible. And then moving on to the next tip, which will kind of tie in, that race practice will give you practice at aid stations. And my advice for that is, during an ultra, take your time at aid stations. So when I normally race the half marathon distance, I carry everything I need, so I don't stop at the aid stations. It's very rare that I do. There was one really hot day where I stopped at the last aid station just to get a bit more water, but it was a very quick stop and I was going again. Whereas during the ultra, I started that way, just really trying to be as quick as I can. But then that meant that towards the end of the race, I probably just didn't take enough time and enough care with my fueling and hydration. So I was actually spending more time at the aid station later into the race. So just take your time, have a real good look, talk to the staff, which is what I was doing, saying thank you. But ultimately, you see them people for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it is. They're stuck there for I don't know, 12 hours. They appreciate a little chat. Get your food, figure out what you need. Do you need salt? Do you need sugar? What type of drink do you want? Do you want electrolytes? Do you want water? Don't just take the easiest option and move on. And in the long run, literally, you'll thank yourself for doing that. And whilst I get my waterproof, and having just had a moan about the weather, perfect time for the next tip, which is don't stress about the weather. You're not in control of it. Obviously, depending on where you pick your race, you're probably likely to know what the weather might be like. If you're picking to race in the Sahara Desert, it's probably going to be dry and warm, so you're probably going to have to deal with that. If you're like me and you pick to run in the Lake District, I mean, this isn't the Lake District, but it's probably going to be like this: wet, a bit cold, a bit windy. But as I said, you're not in control of that, so As long as you have a bit of an idea of what it's going to be like, then you don't need to stress about it. Right, whilst I've been running, I've thought of a bonus tip, because I made notes for this video like 3 months ago, and because I've not really been running, I've not made it, and my lack of fitness today has made me think of this bonus tip. So I'm not going to run with this, but it is listen to your body during the recovery. It's something I didn't really do. I tried to rush back to running. I gave myself like 2 full weeks off, and I do understand, if you've done numerous ultras and you're watching this, you probably think, what are you talking about? You can bounce back quite quickly. I'm sure you can. This was my first ever ultra. It was physically demanding, and I tried to rush back too soon. Got a calf niggle, got a little niggle on my quad, then done some quite intense training when I was over them niggles and got a bit run down and got ill. And that's ultimately why I'm now not fit, and it's taken nearly 3 months. So listen to your body. It'll tell you when it's ready to get back to running, and mine wasn't. So having spoke to and met numerous trail runners in the past like year and a half that I've been back running, I'm fairly certain a lot of us are all the same. We're a little bit crazy, but we just love running. So when it comes to like planning my ultra, I was initially thinking of running in Slovenia in the Julian Alps by UTMB 50k. I have been to Slovenia many times, love the country, beautiful running trails, but here is where the tip comes in. If it's your very first ever ultra, do not complicate things. I still travelled to the Lake District. It was like an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours, but you want to minimise the complications. You want to minimise the effort before the effort. Like dealing with flights, hotels, different currency, different language, different foods, all that kind of stuff. It's your first ultra. Listen, my next one might well be somewhere completely different. I'll be fine with that because I've kind of got used to what to expect. But do not complicate what should be the easy bit. The hard bit should be doing the ultra. Just turning up and starting the race should be straightforward. So don't overcomplicate it. Pick somewhere you want to run. I'm not saying just pick the closest place, even if it doesn't interest you. Pick somewhere that interests you because you'll enjoy it a lot more. That's why I picked the lakes. But don't make it too difficult for yourself before you even start the race. Okay, my last 2 bits of advice are very much about race day. Your training's done, you know, it is what it is. If it's gone well, great. If it's not gone so well, but you're still there, give it absolutely everything you've got. But one thing everyone should do, and I get it can be tough, but enjoy the moment. The amount of times I think back to the 50k in the lakes and just some of the scenery, even on the toughest climbs, the tough descents where my quads were burning, the scenery was incredible. Spoke to numerous people who are just like-minded trail runners, different backgrounds, different parts of the UK. You're all doing the exact same thing. You started in the same place, and ultimately, no matter how long it takes, everyone ends up in the same place, hopefully at the finish line. Enjoy it. Every step, every twist, every turn, every up, every down, all the aid stations, volunteers. Just enjoy the day, because the second you've crossed that finish line, the race is over, and there'll always be another one. But it is nice to just enjoy it, and then you'll remember what was hopefully a good day for your very first ever ultra. And finally, you have just potentially, or maybe in a few months, will have completed an ultramarathon, whether it's 50k, 50 mile, 100k, 100 mile or more. It's your first. Now, I don't know the numbers, but I know the numbers of people who have completed the marathon are low, percentage wise, anyway. So the number of people who have completed an ultra, probably even lower. Make a fuss about it. Listen, not everyone's going to understand, and that's fine. But the people that do will obviously be happy for you, and ultimately you've done something really fucking cool, really tough, something you should be proud of. I was disappointed in how long it took me because, as I said earlier in the video, I set an unrealistic time expectation. But it took me about half an hour to get that out of my mind. And I was looking at the medal and it said 53k. And I was just like, that's insane. Like, I never thought I'd even be able to run a marathon. Like, prior to training for this, my longest run was 15 miles. Like, so to run 33, 31, 32, 33, whatever it was just not even possible in my mind months before. So be proud, make a fuss about it, and enjoy the fact that you've just done something really hard but really cool. Anyway, that's all my advice. If you've done an ultra or you're training for one and you want to share your bits of advice that you've learned along the way, drop them in the comments. Let's kind of make the comments a place to help people training for their first or maybe their next ultra that they just want to improve upon. Like me, next time I do one, I'm going to want to improve. So leave your bits of advice in the comments. Give the video a like. It will help me and the channel and the video reach more people. I'm going to carry on with my very unfit run here in the rain. This is hopefully for me a step back into training in the right direction with some races in mind for the new year. So thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next one.